Okay, and we are good. All right. Hello. First, I want to apologize if anybody hears the air conditioning running in the background. It's currently 95 degrees in Rochester, and it is a scorcher. So, but we'll make it work. Macro Intervention by Matthew Bailey. Okay, so to get started, what is a macro intervention? We've obviously talked about that a lot in this last 8 weeks. It's really an approach to focus on a larger scale social issue and create system change. Now that can be in a lot of different aspects. A macro intervention is looking at a larger scale and trying to fix a system. I want to use that very vaguely, but fix a system of some type that is needing a change. Like I said, community organizations, policies, all that. So it's a larger scale that is trying to fix some type of social issue. For my intervention, I chose to do alternative healthy meals for school-aged children in southern community states. That is a tongue twister if you say that fast. School-aged children suffer more from diabetes, high blood pressure, higher levels of cholesterol, heart disease, and a lot of the issues stem to their meals that are provided to them. Now, I'm not saying all the issues stem to that, but a lot of the issues start at a young age by some of the foods that they're given. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but as you can see, we'll talk about cultural norms and all that, but you can see a lot of traditional values that are passed on with school meals included. So this macro intervention is to come up with an alternative options for healthy eating, healthy meals, and yeah. First, before we do any of that, let's look at some theory. Let's look at theory. Theory is based on social work. We have to do everything with theory for social work. Systems theory, I love using this theory. It definitely can impact a macro intervention. It provides the framework, understanding how one community and individuals relying on that community, the community relying on other organizations, policies. Systems theory is like a larger scale. So you start with one, it works its way up to a larger scale. We can definitely relate that to this macro intervention because cultural norms, socioeconomical statuses in this system, in this theory of southern community states, lack of adequate resources. We'll talk more about that in the presentation, but systems theory very much is a broad aspect to how this macro intervention can entail. It could it can help it can support, or it can kind of hinder it with some of the conflicts I've talked about with social economical statuses, cultural norms, and all that. Next, we can talk about social welfare. It could definitely interfere with a macro system. I love the residual approach because it's one that actually can hinder my intervention. The residual approach is a option that is used if all other options are already used. So to put it in simple terms, if we're trying to make an intervention of trying to create healthier alternative lunches, we need to exhaust all of our options. We need to make sure that we contacted the school, that we contacted local communities and agencies and food pantries before we get any social assistance, before any social welfare can go into effect. And the other thing I want to go on this with is this is a temporary fix. This is not a long-term solution. This is not a long-term social welfare, social assistance program that can help. In this type of residual approach, it's a very temporary, we're here to help, this is it, nothing else. So this approach of a residual approach can actually hinder my social or my macro intervention if we do not have the adequate resources to provide. And we are relying on this residual approach through social welfare, it will overall hinder my macro intervention. Okay, now that we kind of touched base on theory, we got to look at the actual intervention. Our very first thing that we already talked about in our previous presentation is our needs assessment. Our needs of why do we need this intervention? Do we have the adequate information? Do we need to dive deeper with more information regarding our needs of alternative healthy lunches? So to kind of piggyback off that, our needs assessment will always come first because we are trying to establish the information for the macro intervention. Okay, so our first step to the actual intervention, after we kind of talked about our needs assessment, we gathered all that information, we talked about theory, is to establish a group. We talked about how we can market this group. I want to use that word lightly, market this group, but promote this group in our needs assessment. But once we have a physical group, we need a spot to meet. We need to talk about the steps that will entail for the intervention. We need to talk about how can this intervention be successful? What resources will we need? And this group could be, I'm just going to say every Tuesday. And it could kind of talk about the progress that we've started on. So to have a group kind of leads me to my next slide of we already need a resource. We need to establish where we are going to meet. Will it be the school? Will it be a community center, a library? We need a physical location. Does that mean that we're doing presentations? Very similar to this. Each group more or less can entail a different way. We could have a physical meeting on Tuesdays. We could do a FaceTime meeting. We could do a live interactive Google Meets. But for this intervention, let's just keep it simple. Let's just say we're going to have a meeting every Tuesday. We're going to pick the school. We have to call the school now, see if we can use their room on Tuesdays for like a community space to gather a meeting. We're just going to keep it simple because the intervention's being done at the school. We're just going to keep the meeting at the school. The next step to our intervention, now that we gathered in a room, we need to talk about how are we going to get the supply. Now that can get a little confusing, but that's the main part of the intervention. If we're trying to get fresh fruits and vegetables to have healthier meals for children, we need to contact different food agencies, food cupboards, local food pantries to see if they have any, if they can donate it to us, if we have to pay for it. Can we set up a partnership with them? Can we get the school involved to see if they can pay for a portion of the work? But we need a physical item. We need those vegetables, those fruits, those healthy resources that will be used in a school setting. Which goes to say we're going to need another resource. How in the world are we going to afford this? I'm just looking at my own personal fruits and vegetables that you buy at the local grocery store here at Wegmans. They are expensive. If we're even getting it at a discounted rate through different agencies, different grocery stores, different food pantries, we need to still be able to afford some of it. And that goes to a good question of how do we get the funds? Of course, there's fundraising events. But I really want to talk about getting to know your target audience, seeking for charitable donations. If we're trying to go and promote this idea of healthy eating and healthy alternative meals, we're not going to contact big companies like Cisco that provide food for our children. We're not going to contact fast food agencies like McDonald's and Burger King and all them. We're going to contact our local community fitness areas like the YMCA, the community centers. We're going to contact local food agencies that are around, Meals on Wheels, Feeding America. These agencies can help us work together to kind of promote a healthy environment. So we do need, the most important I want to say is to get to target and get to know your audience, and seek financial support from the school themselves. This could be a resource. Might not be successful, but what's the worst we get is a no. But I often think back to some fundraising events that can help raise money. Simple things, and it goes a long way. Holding at the local fair in the town of the Southern Community States, like a dunk tank where you pay $5 to try to dunk someone, and all the money raised goes to this macro intervention. Or we can do something like a pie throwing contest, or contact local community events to see if they can promote a charitable donation towards our macro intervention. It can be challenging. It can be very challenging to try to support fundraising events to raise money, but these are the tools that we will need to have this intervention. And the next step, after we contacted the food pantry, just the local food agencies, we have to get the food from that physical location to our school. And I do want to say one school at this time. I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but one school at this time. So if we're just getting, I think I wrote on here, 50 bundles of fresh vegetables, that could be a lot. That might take a couple people to bring these fruits and vegetables, but we need the physical items at the school. So we need to transport it in a way that can help us for our intervention. And that goes without saying, we're going to need another resource on that. How are we going to get it to the school? Do we have part of the group and the people in this group of a macro intervention? Do we have 3 people come every day to our local food pantry and say, hey, we're here for the school's pickup of fruits and vegetables? Do we need other vehicles? I do know, and we could talk about, again, cultural norms. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But a lot of cultural tendencies in southern states to have pickup trucks. Up here in upstate New York, we have some trucks, but that's more of a southern tendency, which they can hold more space. We'll put it that way. So maybe we only need 1 truck, but we need 3 people to help load it. We got to get volunteers. Again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. This macro intervention, we need to have all these resources, and how do we get these volunteers? We can hold a fundraising event saying volunteers needed. That goes right with our community event that we said, like at our local fair. Maybe we have an event saying, okay, if you can't donate, can you help us with volunteering to pick up these fruits and vegetables and bring them to the school? Now that we have them at the school, so we transported our goods. We have these goods located at the school. We need to put them somewhere. The school might not be used to it. You got to think of it this way: is if our school has been serving these processed, frozen, unhealthy meals, they might not have a lot of resources in space. I want to say that way. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But they might not have a lot of space to put all of these fresh fruits and vegetables. I talked about earlier, just 50 bundles of fruits and vegetables. That's a lot. It is. But you think about just an average size class of 300 people, that's going to go very fast. You're going to need multiple layers of them. You might need multiple trips back and forth to the local food pantry. So we need to think about a physical space. Where are we going to hold this? Which goes to my next part. We need another resource. Do we add on? Is there mini refrigerators that we can put some fruits and vegetables in? Because you think about it, majority of fruits and veggies can sit out. However, like blueberries, strawberries, cherries, all come to my head. Watermelon, they need to get in the refrigerator after a while. So do we need more refrigerator? Again, this is more resources that we will need to promote with. And some of the fundraising money that we talked about can go to this too. So I don't want there to think of this idea that all of our resources are just going for the food. Maybe we got a good partnership with a local agency, and the money that we raise spends money on these refrigerators. Maybe we need more storage bins, so the school and us got together and got more storage bins to put all these fruits and vegetables in. Now that we have the resources, we physically just got them, we partnered with a local food pantry, we transported them, we now need to prepare these meals. Now I wrote right there in that picture is a little picture of just a fresh fruit and vegetable salad over there. But we need options to prepare these foods because these foods have not been used before, so it's a new learning opportunity. We need another resource for that. Maybe the cooks that we have in the school cafeterias, they might not be used to cooking with fresh fruits and vegetables. I know it's something simple, but if you think about, again, cultural norms, and we think about these theories of a systems theory, they are in this idea of this is what has been served for all these years, this is what we're going to continue to serve. They might not know how to cook a meal with fresh fruits and vegetables. We need a resource. Do we need a cook? Do we need a chef? Do we need a contact a local retired chef that wrote on here that would come in and volunteer once a month to help out and teach the school cafeteria workers how to prepare a meal? Do we get involved with culinary programs? Maybe the high school has a local, we called ours BOCES program, but a local culinary programs where high school students can kind of learn how to do a trade. In this case, it would be culinary. Do we get involved with that and try to partner with them and offer them, hey, can you guys come and teach our local schools how to cook fresh fruit salad every day? Something simple. But this resource is required to get to our end result of our macro intervention. After we did the intervention, okay, and this part gets a little like kind of passionate about this one. After we did the intervention, and our intervention thrived at that school, and I want to say that again, our intervention thrived at that school. We can use this intervention for other schools, for other communities, and that's what's going to make this a macro intervention. The school itself would be a small, but a macro intervention, but if we continue to use this intervention and promote a idea of healthy alternative lunches, so every day now a student is getting a fresh meal for lunch or breakfast that day, this can turn into a cultural shift. This can turn into an idea that other schools are doing the same thing. And long term, this will help keep kids healthier, keep them with a balanced diet, and overall will promote a healthier living with a lowering the chance of medical conditions. And to look at a micro level, you know, we talked about so much on a macro level, but to look at a micro level, if that one child went home and told their brother or sister, hey, today at school I had a salad and it was really good, and the brother and sister comes the next day and tries the salad at school again, now you're just promoting systems within to help keep that brother or that sister eating healthy. So it's almost like it's piggybacking off each other. Cultural response interventions. Sometimes interventions don't go smooth. As we talked about, there's a lot of steps that just went into a simple intervention of promoting a healthy alternative meals for children at school age. Now, I'm just talking about, like I said, one school that could long-term assist other communities, but you saw the steps that went into that. Sometimes that still does not go smooth. We have these cultural norms, and I've talked a lot about that, and theories that can support or hinder our intervention. Cultural response is big in communities. We'll talk about the difference between some cultural norms from our standpoint in upstate New York, comparing that to southern state communities and how it could be different. Cultural norms. I feel like I've talked so much about cultural norms. Southern hospitality. A lot of the foods down there are generated from this generational approach, this multi-generational of our grandparents had it, our family had it, our kids had it, this recipe that keeps going down, these southern staples, and some of their food is very delicious. But macaroni and cheese, fried chicken, I've talked about this in my needs assessment. These are cultural norms. These are big. That's a staple. It's a tradition for this community. So how do we change that? How do we try to get their mindset of these cultural norms are important, but we need to kind of transition to a healthier alternative? Well, we could look at cultural compliance and see that we got to educate them. We got to educate the next generation on trying to eat healthy. And doing this can help support our intervention. Socioeconomic status. It's the hard one. We look at these interventions, and we don't always have healthy foods because of financial barriers. Think about just going to the local store right now. You can go to the dollar store and get a dinner for $2-3 if you get some ramen noodles and a box of macaroni and cheese. Again, it's something that just came off the top of my head, but you spent $2, or do you spend, I don't know, $9-10 for grilled chicken, fresh vegetables, and fresh fruit? Unfortunately, if they're in a lower socioeconomic status, it can be a barrier. A community-based approach to help aid in this macro intervention. We can seek alternative options. Maybe local farmers can help out. Maybe we plant vegetables at the school if we can't have the funds to help with this intervention. There are other alternative options. I want to use that option again by planting vegetables at the school, because that option can be very educational, teaches the children, and also you'll get something out of it. So there are alternative options for socioeconomic status barriers. And the hardest one, I really think, is the lack of resources. It's very complex, this issue. We look at southern communities, they're more likely to suffer from food insecurities due to lack of resources. Financial resources being one, but just due to lack of resources in general. A lot of times in the summertime we get droughts. We up here in upstate New York get droughts, but our droughts are not like southern communities and southern states where their droughts can last a lot longer. So maybe we need to talk about policy change, more resources. We need to advocate for support around these policy change with our group leader. Maybe this can help support our intervention of looking at other programs. I use SNAP because that is often used. It's one of the biggest programs around. But children are often suffering from these food insecurities that can completely hinder our macro intervention. And it's just a way to think about a greater picture. It goes back again to the systems theory, but it goes back to thinking of a greater picture of how one person in this system can be affected by multiple different, in this case, hindering opportunities. In the conclusion, macro intervention offering school-age children healthier meals can be challenging. It definitely can be. I only talked about 5 different steps that would be needed for this intervention. And this, in my opinion, was a simpler intervention. This can still be challenging. Theory, we talk about theory a lot. Theory is how we support our intervention. And lastly, I've learned how many steps go into it. It's one of those things where it could take a while. There could be failures in it. But an intervention on this level for a macro intervention really goes back to why we needed it. Why we needed this intervention to begin with. We looked at our needs assessment and we realized we need an intervention. So overall, intervention has a lot of promise to it. It can be very successful, but it can be very challenging during the intervention. And there are my wonderful references. I hope we learned a little bit about a macro intervention for alternatives, healthy meals for children. And thank you again.